over his 2 terms as governor of Louisiana. My next guest championed school choice, opportunity scholarships, and the adoption of charter schools, not to mention teacher tenure reform. What were the results? Here with his take is former Louisiana governor and presidential candidate Bobby Jindal. Thank you for joining us from Baton Rouge.
Raymond, thank you for having me. It's great to be back on the air with you.
Great to have you. I want to start with Betsy DeVos, the new education secretary. She, like you, has devoted herself to school choice. The heart of the Trump plan seems to be this $20 billion block grant to the states to fund school vouchers. Now, some say this is only going to increase federal intrusion into local private schools. What have you seen on the local level, Governor Jindal?
Well, look, I think it's very important to make the dollars portable, to have the dollars follow the students instead of making the students follow the dollars. But Raymond, you raise a very important point. Even as we make these dollars follow the students, we don't want the same federal bureaucracy to come into the private schools that's already there in the public schools. Here in Louisiana, we have one of the country's most ambitious school choice programs. Like you mentioned, we've got tax rebate programs, we've got charter schools, we've got scholarship program, we've got over 100,000 kids in some form of choice. We've done that while still preserving the autonomy and the flexibility in those private schools that makes them so special. The worst thing you could do is kill off their autonomy and replicate that bureaucracy. So I think you can have both, but you're right to be concerned about that. It's important to maintain that balance.
Governor Jindal, 93% of New Orleans students attend charter schools. What has been the impact, and is this a threat to the public schools? The teachers' unions insist that it is.
Well, I mean, look, the teachers' unions are more worried about protecting a failing system than actually being worried about the students that are trapped in that system. Soon in New Orleans, it's going to be 100% of those kids will be in charter schools in 5 years. Over 60% of those kids were going to failing schools. Now it's less than 10%. We've seen record growth in retention rates, graduation rates, record growth in AP scores, ACT scores. What we have seen is that kids that were formerly trapped in failing public schools now have a real chance to get a great education. To me, that's what's most important. It's not about the system. It's not about the adults in the system. It's about the kids in the system. New Orleans is a great example of what happens when you have competition, when you have choice, when you trust parents to make decisions for their own kids.
I want to talk about the voucher record. The National Bureau of Economic Research did a study. They contend that your Louisiana Scholarship Program vouchers reduced academic achievement. They claim attendance at private schools actually lowered math, reading, science, and social studies scores. Why will this work nationally?
Well, first of all, that's simply not true. If you actually compare to what the kids were doing in their public schools before they came to those private schools, clearly they're getting more opportunities to learn, whether it's reading, math. The data shows the longer they've been in these private school programs, the better they do over time. And they've continued to show rapid gains. But here's the most important thing. Look, you know, both sides can throw data at each other. It really comes down to the best form of accountability is parental choice. If the parents aren't happy, they'll move their kids to a different school. Over 90% of the parents in the school choice in this voucher program, the scholarship program, are pleased with the results. And look, we can throw numbers back and forth, but the most powerful thing is when you listen to the moms. And a lot of times these are single moms. I'll share with you just one example. I remember meeting a mom in New Orleans East. Her daughter was going to a parochial school. She wasn't even Catholic, but she loved the values, she loved the uniform, she loved the academic rigor. This mom told me her story. She said, look, I was a single mom on welfare. I had my daughter when I was a teenager. I got pregnant when I was a teenager. Her own mom got pregnant when she was a teenager and had her at a young age. She wanted to break those cycles. She wanted her child, she wanted her daughter to have a chance to get a better education, to have more opportunities than she had. She was so grateful for this voucher, this scholarship program, so grateful her daughter was going to a parochial school. Ultimately, it's the ultimate form of accountability is parental choice. If that mom's not happy with the education her daughter's getting, she'll change schools. And this is what she told me. This was the first time her daughter was thinking about staying in school beyond high school. It was the first time her daughter was bringing home homework, first time she was safe in school, first time she was wearing a uniform, she had paper, pencils, things that we take for granted in a classroom. This was the first time her daughter had those things. The ultimate form of accountability is parental choice. Let's trust those moms.
Are you at all concerned that this plan on a national level, if you spread federal dollars through the states and in the form of vouchers, that these students will overwhelm the parochial and the private schools and ruin the things that they're known for and indeed celebrated for today?
Well, look, a couple of things. One, it's not, all these schools still have the choice about whether they want to participate or not. Nobody's making them participate. Many do, but others decide not to. So it's certainly up to those schools. And many of it see as part of their ministry, their mission, and they want to serve these students. It's good for those students, it's good for these schools, but it's still up to those schools to make that decision. Secondly, we're not sitting here saying that every child should go to a private school or every child should go to a charter school. What we're saying is that every child learns differently. We've got this top-down, one-size-fits-all approach in America. What we're saying is replace that with a bottom-up approach. Some kids will do better in a dual enrollment program. Some kids will do better in a charter school. Some kids will do better in a college prep program. The point is, let the parents decide. Every child learns differently. And then finally, third, even in Louisiana, with this ambitious school choice program, over 100,000 kids participating in choice, we still have the vast majority of our kids in public schools. The studies have shown, though, that choice and competition improve the public schools. So it's good for the kids that get to go to private schools, but it's also good for the kids that are in the public schools. Those schools get better as well. What you also see is the private schools are great at adding new capacity. So one of the things we're seeing in Louisiana is we have course choice. It's not just school choice, but it's course choice where kids can start their day in a public school and then go get instruction, whether it's in math or science or in a foreign language, from a different provider. So it's not all or nothing. It can be mix and match. And so at the end of the day, what we're seeing is the private sector is adaptable. They're creating new capacity. They're meeting the needs of these students. At the end of the day, whether that child's in a great public school or a parochial school or a private school, the important thing is that every child has a chance to get a great education.
Governor Jindal, what do you make of this plan? Congressman Tom Massey has submitted a bill that would eliminate the Department of Education by 2018. A good idea?
Well, you know, I actually put out a detailed plan. You mentioned I was recently a candidate for president.
That's right.
I put out a pretty detailed plan about what I would do with the Federal Department of Education. It would still maintain the department, but it would dramatically reduce its size, its scope, its responsibilities, its funding. I'm, as a governor, a former governor, as somebody who's been active at both the state and the federal level, I believe that the best governance, the governance that's closest to the people. So instead of all these decisions being made in D.C., let the decisions be made at the local and state level, return the funding, return the decision-making authority to the local and state levels. There are still things that the Federal Department of Education can and should do. For example, true civil rights enforcement, not these bogus political cases, but true civil rights enforcement. Secondly, providing real tools, real opportunities for parents to measure how their kids are doing. And that doesn't mean Common Core, certainly. I'm opposed to that. But there are things that the Federal Department of Education can do to help facilitate so that parents can compare how their kids are learning, compare different tests. So there are certain limited roles for the Federal Department of Education, but I think today it's trying to do too much and trying to be all things to all people. In our example, in our state, for example, the Obama administration used the Federal Department of Justice to try to stop our school choice program, and you had the federal government try to come in and tell moms that the federal government knew better than them how their children should be educated. So I think there is a role for the Federal Department of Education, but I think it's far too big, far too bureaucratic. Common Core is a great example of that. Federal government shouldn't be making local curriculum decisions, and they shouldn't certainly be coming in and telling moms that the D.C. bureaucrats know better than them.
Governor Jindal, final question. You know Betsy DeVos. You worked with her on the local level to move some of your initiatives and some of these groundbreaking education reforms years ago. The critique of her is that she has no experience running anything. She's never worked or been near public schools. You would say what? And what do you expect from her?
Look, the opposition, now that the theatrics are over, now that all the speeches on the Senate floor are over, let's be very clear what this is about. We don't have equality of opportunity in education in America. If you're in the middle class, if you're in the upper class, you do have great educational choices for your kids. All those people criticizing Betsy DeVos, all those Democratic senators, I guarantee you their children, their grandchildren are going to great schools. They live in neighborhoods with great public schools, or they can afford to send their kids to great private schools. But if you're in the lower income, if you don't make that much money, you don't have great opportunities today. Betsy DeVos has spent much of her life, she's committed her own personal resources, her own time, fighting to give every child in America a great chance at a great education. I'm excited for the change that's coming to the Federal Department of Education. I applaud President Trump for having the courage to take on the status quo. I applaud Betsy DeVos for dedicating her life to this. The reality is we've done the same thing over and over, and America now ranks about 16th, depending on the different international rankings you look at. We rank 16th in educational outcomes in the world. We can do better than that. Einstein said the definition of insanity was doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. That's what we've done in education. Betsy DeVos will bring change. She will fight to make sure that every student gets a great education. The reason the teacher unions, those Democratic senators, were so opposed to her, they know they've been hypocrites. They've been defending the failed system, not the students.
I've only got a minute here. Maybe this is unfair to ask you in my final seconds, but the Obamacare repeal and replace, should that be simultaneous? You know more about health care than most people I've come across, even here in D.C. What form should that replacement look like, Governor Jindal?
Couple of things. I think they need to do it very quickly. No more of these delays. They've had years now. The Republicans have had years to come up with their plans. There's no reason for them to continue to delay this. I think that the replacement plan should have 3 criteria. Number one, we don't need to increase the Obamacare. We don't need to maintain the higher levels of taxes and spending. We can't afford the federal government we've got today. We don't need to continue to grow it. Secondly, we don't need to encourage more dependence on the federal government. One of the things Obamacare did was it made people newly dependent on the federal government even when they already had private insurance. Right. Third, we don't need the federal government micromanaging our health care, telling us what kind of benefits we get, not telling us what kind of insurance we can buy. We need choice and competition in the health insurance marketplace. I put out a very detailed plan about how to do this. We need to make health care affordable. Obamacare did not do that. Any Republican replacement plan needs to avoid those 3 pitfalls. So, for example, let's get rid of the individual mandate. Let's get rid of the new taxes and spending. Let's not continue the Medicaid expansion. Instead, let's make private health care truly affordable for the American people.
Very good. Governor Jindal, thank you so much for the time. We'll check in with you again, and you can learn more about Governor Bobby Jindal's ideas on education policy and much more at AmericaNext, americanext.org. Thank you again, Governor.